Not every legend wears a crown. Some wear vinyl roofs, fake wood paneling, and chrome mustaches. These weren't the muscle-bound heroes of your dreams. They were the design rejects Ford tried to pass off as style. Today, we're diving into the most bizarre, bloated, and downright ugly Torinos to ever roll off the assembly line. When most gearheads talk Torino, they picture quarter-mile monsters and NASCAR-built fastbacks. But beneath the legacy of Cobra jets and Talladegas lies a different story. One of marketing misfires, suburban compromises, and some of the strangest styling decisions the Blue Oval ever signed off on. From phony luxury cues to wagons with delusions of grandeur, the 1970 gave us a lineup of Torinos that made us ask, who greenlit this? This isn't about the fastest or the rarest. This is about the misfits. Welcome to Muscle Cars Revolution, and here are the 8 UGLIEST Ford Torinos ever made. Top 1 1970 Ford Torino Cobra Twister Special. In the golden age of muscle, subtlety wasn't a virtue. But the 1970 Torino Twister Special took things so far over the top even the Kansas plains couldn't flatten it. Built to honor tornado country, it looked like the storm itself had done the designing. Ford only made 90 units, all shipped to Kansas City dealerships in November 1969. Every car wore screaming Twister Special decals, spiraling tornadoes flung across the quarter panels and rear flanks like comic book graffiti. The body? Usually grabber orange, vermilion, or bright yellow, with a flat black shaker hood scoop, wild stripes, and blackout trim that clashed like plaid and polka dots. Inside, the cabin stuck to basic Torino Cobra equipment, black vinyl bucket seats, rim-blow steering wheel, and a rally gauge cluster, but no trim package or luxury option could offset the exterior's visual whiplash. Under the skin, though, it was no joke. The 429 Cobra Jet V8, 370 horsepower, was a torque monster, mated to either a C6 automatic or top-loader 4-speed, and could tear through the quarter-mile in 14.2 seconds. With 3.91 traction lock gears and competition suspension, it moved like a muscle car, just dressed like a toy. Despite its straight-line power, the Twister Special was mocked, even in its own time. Critics dubbed it gimmicky, and many buyers de-stripped or repainted them out of shame. Few were preserved in original form. Today, surviving Twisters are worth over $80,000, not for beauty, but because they're so weird. They stand out in any show lineup, mostly for the wrong reasons. But if you thought decals and clashing colors were as far as Ford would go, wait until you see what they did to a TV star's ride 2 years later. It wasn't just loud, it was a full-blown fashion crisis on wheels. Top 2 1976 Ford Gran Torino, Starsky and Hutch edition. On screen, it was a rolling icon, burning rubber through alleyways, chasing crooks, and jumping over curbs in slow-motion glory. But in real life, the 1976 Starsky and Hutch Gran Torino felt more like a novelty act than a street predator. Under the bright lights of a TV camera, it screamed cool, but parked in the driveway, it looked like a traffic cone that had joined a disco band. To capitalize on the success of the ABC crime drama Starsky and Hutch, Ford released a special run of S&H Torinos based on the Gran Torino two-door fastback. Roughly 1,000 units were produced, all dipped in bright red, paint code 2B, with a thick white vector stripe that slashed across the body from front fender to C-pillar. The design was loud, flashy, and unmistakably made for TV. Riding on 15-inch slotted aluminum wheels, the Torino sat high on its suspension, giving it a slightly awkward stance. The chrome bumpers were massive, and the rear quarters pinched awkwardly inward, like someone melted a '69 muscle coupe and stretched it for syndication. Inside, buyers were greeted with plush vinyl or cloth bench seats, fake wood-grain dashboard inserts, and thin door panels with minimal trim. A rim-blow steering wheel and basic gauge cluster reminded you this wasn't a performance car. You got power steering, air conditioning, and maybe an AM/FM radio, but no sportiness to speak of. Under the hood sat a 351 Windsor V8, making just 152 horsepower. Optional engines included the 400 and even a 460 V8, but thanks to emissions restrictions and the car's over 4,000-pound curb weight, performance was sluggish. The Starsky and Hutch Torino managed 0 to 60 in about 10.8 seconds, and the quarter mile dragged on for over 17.5 seconds, a far cry from its action-packed image. Today, the S&H Torino lives in pop culture more than car culture. Valued at around $25,000, $35,000, it's more a nostalgic collectible than a performance icon. It's campy, clunky, and cartoonish, but unmistakable. And if the Starsky and Hutch Torino was the superhero costume, the next Mustang was the opposite. An economy model so stripped down, it practically vanished into the crowd. Top 3. 1971 Ford Torino GT Convertible. What happens when muscle loses its edge, then throws on a floppy hat? You get the 1971 Torino GT Convertible, a confused creature born in the twilight of Detroit bravado. It promised power with the GT badge, then folded into something soft, lumpy, and awkward. It wasn't a looker, it wasn't a performer, and worst of all, it had no idea what it wanted to be. Only 1,613 units ever left the factory, and it's easy to see why Ford didn't push it harder. The design was a stylistic mismatch, a drooping front clip, slab-sided flanks, and a high beltline that made the body look bloated with the top down. With the roof up, the vinyl soft top sagged like a stretched-out gym sock, its seams puffing under every breeze. Dropped? You were greeted by a cockpit full of beige plastic, fake wood trim, and basic black vinyl seats that lacked both sport and luxury. No console mount shifter. No rally gauges. Just a column shifter. And a rim-blow steering wheel pretending to belong. But don't be fooled by the plush act. Under the hood, Ford still offered muscled credentials. Buyers could spec a 302 Windsor, a 351 Cleveland, or even the legendary 429 Cobra jet. But the vast majority came with the mid-range 351, pumping out 240 horsepower. On paper, that seemed respectable, but in real life, with nearly 3,950 pounds to lug around, the GT convertible drove like a waterbed on casters. It could do 0 to 60 in 9.2 seconds, but it felt slower thanks to soft suspension, chassis flex, and steering with the precision of a rowboat in a storm. It wasn't bold enough for muscle purists, and not stylish or light enough for convertible buyers. It became a mascot for Ford's early '70s identity crisis, torn between performance heritage and comfort-seeking compromise. Today, you'll find them at auctions selling between $25,000, $30,000, collected more for rarity than brilliance. It's a car that survived because nobody remembered to throw it out. And just when you thought the Torino GT couldn't drift further from its roots, Ford stretched it, added a tailgate, and built a version even clumsier than this. The 1970 Torino Wagon. Top 4 1970 Ford Torino Wagon. What do you get when you stretch a muscle car into a family hauler and forget to include the muscle? Meet the 1970 Ford Torino Wagon, a long-roof bruiser with none of the punch. It had the bulk, it had the attitude, but once the tailgate dropped, so did any hope of performance credibility. Available in several trims, the base Torino wagon came with the 250 CI inline-six, but buyers could climb up to a 351 Windsor or Cleveland, or even the 429 Thunderjet in top configurations. Most buyers stuck with the mid-range 351, which made around 250 horsepower. Still, with a curb weight over 4,200 pounds, this wagon had more in common with a school bus than a street machine. Its 0 to 60 time hovered near 10 seconds, and it struggled even more when loaded with kids, coolers, and camping gear. Visually, it was a strange blend. Ford tried to maintain Torino's Fastback-inspired lines while stretching the body for cargo duty. The result was a front-heavy design with awkward rear proportions. The tail section sat high, almost like it was trying to squat for drag launch, but it never launched anywhere fast. Inside, it offered acres of vinyl bench seating, faux wood paneling, and wagon-specific options like a third-row jump seat and a power rear window. But no matter the trim, the vibe was more suburban mom than street menace. Even with optional V8s, the suspension was tuned for comfort, not cornering. It wallowed in turns, nosedived under braking, and floated like a boat in crosswinds. Muscle car? Only in name. With its long wheelbase and soft ride, it became the antithesis of what the Torino badge was once meant to be. Collectors today see it as a quirky oddball. While prices haven't soared, clean examples now fetch $18,000, $25,000, primarily for nostalgia or as resto mod platforms. It's rare, not because it was loved, but because most were used, abused, and crushed. But if this long-roof lumberer was Ford's idea of practicality, what came next was their attempt to inject sportiness into something even stranger. A fastback wagon dressed in GT drag. Top 5. 1972 Ford Gran Torino Sport Fastback. You'd think sport and fastback in the same name would guarantee something at least remotely cool. But the 1972 Gran Torino Sport Fastback had other plans. From certain angles, it looked like it was trying too hard to be a muscle car, and from others, like it gave up halfway through the design process. The result? A confused coupe that couldn't decide if it was sexy or just sad. This was Ford's attempt to update the Torino for the 70s, with big, curvy bodywork and a long, sloping roof that screamed aerodynamic, in theory, but in practice the bulging fenders, awkward grille, and chunky proportions made it look like a muscle car that had eaten too much. The massive chrome bumper looked like an afterthought. Side profile? A wall of steel on wheels. Inside, the sport model tried to justify its name. Bucket seats, optional rally gauges, faux wood trim, and a center console made it feel slightly upscale until you looked closer and saw the cost-cut corners. Flimsy plastics, rattling trim, and door panels that warped in the heat. Not exactly GT spirit. Engine options ranged from a 302 V8 to a 429 big block. But most buyers got the 351 Cleveland, putting out around 258 horsepower. With a curb weight pushing 4,200 pounds, the fastback was sluggish off the line. It took over 8.5 seconds to hit 60, and even longer to make sense visually. Worse, its soft suspension made cornering feel like steering a canoe. Despite the sport badge, it lacked the bite to match its bark. It wasn't fast enough for drag fans, and not elegant enough for collectors. Most ended up faded, dented, and forgotten. Today, it's the Torino you pass at a car show, and keep walking. But if the sport fastback was bloated confusion, the next Torino dropped the pretense entirely, and embraced full family wagon mode in all its boxy, slow-motion glory. Top 6. 1975 Ford Gran Torino Station Wagon. Standard. This wasn't just your average wagon, it was the death rattle of ambition. The 1975 Gran Torino station wagon didn't whisper family car, it shouted, I give up. With slab sides, cargo-first design, and a body so uninspired it could have been sold by the pound, it redefined what uninvolved looked like in four wheels. Ford designed it for maximum practicality and minimum charm. The front fascia was a bizarre stack of square bezels and chrome bars, like a sketch abandoned halfway through. From the side, it looked like a hearse on stilts. Flat roof, flat doors, flat sole. Most were sprayed in beige, pea green, or rust brown, with optional full wood grain that aged like a bad tattoo. The bumpers? Large enough to serve dinner on. Step inside and things didn't get better. You got bench seats as wide as a sofa, padded vinyl that cracked in sunlight, brown molded dashboards, and fake wood appliques that curled at the edges. No tachometer, no sporty cues, just a giant steering wheel and endless plastic trim. Under the hood, a 351 Windsor V8, pushing out a sad 153 horsepower, mated to a lazy 3-speed automatic. At nearly 4,400 pounds, it wheezed to 60 miles per hour in 12+ seconds, with handling best described as nautical. The power steering had more play than a child's toy, and braking was a full-body experience. Nobody raced one, nobody restored one. It wasn't even ugly in a memorable way, it was just there. Cars like this filled driveways, rusted out, and vanished. Today they survive mostly in family photo albums or junkyard limbo. But while the base wagon quietly disappeared, Ford had a brighter idea. Slap luxury trim and fake elegance on the same platform. What emerged next wasn't class, it was chaos in wood paneling. Top 7. 1971 Torino Cobra Jet 429 Police Interceptor. What happens when the long arm of the law starts swinging a big block? The 1971 Torino Cobra Jet 429 Police Interceptor wasn't just a pursuit car. It was a full-blown muscle machine in disguise. Built for speed, authority, and intimidation, it turned the highway patrol into a rolling nightmare for anyone foolish enough to run. Ford didn't mess around with this one. Beneath the plain brougham exterior was a 429 Cobra Jet V8, pumping out 370 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. It came paired with a heavy-duty C6 automatic transmission, reinforced driveline, police-rated suspension, and factory 3.5 or 3.91 gears. High-speed rated, Goodyears were bolted onto steel wheels, while up front sat a certified 140 miles per hour speedometer. Exterior cues, just a push bar, spotlight, and subtle government-ordered black and white livery. But make no mistake, this car was all fangs under the hood. Here's the kicker, these weren't mass-produced. They were ordered in low numbers via Ford's DSO, District Special Order Program, for specific state law enforcement agencies. California Highway Patrol, Kansas, and a few southern states received small batches. Most estimates suggest fewer than 250 units were built, and nearly all were driven hard into retirement or quietly auctioned off. No fanfare, no preservation. Survivors? Barely traceable. Inside, it was police Spartan. Rubber floors, vinyl bench seats, no radio, just a Motorola unit and a big red kill switch. But from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, this 4,000-pound beast had no trouble chasing down muscle-bound outlaws. It could run with 440 Mopars and even keep pace with early Camaros on the open stretch. Cops finally had the upper hand, and a damn fast one at that. The Cobra jet Interceptor was a factory-badged monster, but if you think this was the wildest weapon Ford ever handed to the police, just wait until they strapped the same powertrain into a full-sized wagon and unleashed it. Top 8, 1974 Ford Gran Torino Elite 2-door. By 1974, Ford was chasing trends instead of setting them. GM had already struck gold with the Monte Carlo, and Chrysler was pushing the Cordoba hard. In response, Ford cobbled together the Gran Torino Elite, a car that desperately wanted to be something it wasn't. It looked like a Thunderbird that had been shrunk, stretched, and forgotten mid-transformation. The Elite wasn't just a Gran Torino with fancy badges, it was a visual migraine. A massive chrome grille up front, borrowed straight from the Thunderbird parts bin, clashed with an otherwise rounded body. Opera windows, tiny, pointless ovals in the C-pillar, were standard, as was a heavy vinyl roof that trapped heat and moisture like a greenhouse. The rear quarter panels bulged awkwardly, and the tail lamps looked borrowed from a failed concept sketch. Step inside, and the luxury didn't get any better. The dash was a single padded slab covered in faux stitching and brittle plastic trim. Wood grain appliques adorned every surface they could glue them to, and the velour bucket seats were so plush you'd sink halfway to the springs. Climate control and cruise were optional, but claustrophobia came free. Most Elites were powered by the 351W or 400M, producing 150-170 horsepower. Some lucky buyers scored a 460, but it didn't matter. The 4,600-pound curb weight crushed any hope of performance. The Elite lumbered from 0 to 60 in 11.5 seconds on a good day. Its suspension was soft enough to rock you to sleep, but firm enough to rattle over potholes. It failed to deliver on every promise. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't sporty, it certainly wasn't elite. Ford killed the Elite name in just a few years, and collectors today barely remember it existed, unless they're hoarding 70s misfires. Still, one Torino managed to be even weirder, ditching coupe styling entirely, slapping on fake paneling, and going full suburban absurd. Beauty may be in the eye of the beholder, but let's be real. Some of these Torinos pushed the limits of what even the most loyal Ford fan could defend. From sagging soft tops to bloated wagons and design decisions that still baffle engineers, each of these cars told a story that was less about speed and more about strange. Some were born out of compromise, others were victims of the times, and a few, well, they were just flat-out mistakes on wheels. But that's what makes them fascinating. Muscle car history isn't a straight line of horsepower and heroism. It's full of odd turns, missteps, and weird experiments that somehow made it to production. So, what's the ugliest Torino you've ever seen? Or maybe owned? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you live for the forgotten, the flawed, and the freakishly fascinating, hit that like button, subscribe, and join the ride. This is Muscle Cars Revolution, where the misfits still matter.